God has a hard-on.
Perfect world, no dream, a primitive cerebrum.
He's a tyrant! He's a sadist!
You're all going to die down here.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Happy heresies, my beloved true seekers. Thanks be to Barbelo and the Virgin Spirit that you have appended yourself to me once again on this dark odyssey through the gnashing rocks of orthodoxy, all the way to the farthest shore. This rolling thunder chasing the wind called the Gnostic Revival. This district of cyber oasis we call the virtual Alexandria.
The answer is up there, Neo. It's looking for you, and it will find you if you want it to.
Welcome and welcome. This is approximately Saturday, April 19th, 2008, the year of our demiurge. I am your host, Abraxas, in his mortal incarnation of Miguel Connor, broadcasting through thegodabovegod.com in some basement in Chicago.
My God, not everything's about you and your little job and your little world.
In various Gnostic scriptures, the Gospel of the Egyptians and the Apocalypse of Adam being two that come to mind, and in legends, Abraxas or Abraxas is an angel, a demon, a redeemed archon, a semi-Aeon, or again the god that towers over both Jehovah and Satan. But a better way to describe Abraxas is comparing him to the Hindu Brahman. Abraxas is not a god or even an entity, but the vital active force of the all that not only sustains creation but gives all the gods their constitution and even identity. Even the omniscient and omnipotent need their fuel by some lapse of logic none of us will ever understand. Abraxas is awesome and fearsome indeed, because he is the impelling source of all that is and isn't, but he is also not the highest form of reality. He is but a pointer to the truer absoluteness we call the pleroma. But, as the Gnostic sage Basilides said, channeling C.G. Jung, if the pleroma had a form, it will be called Abraxas.
Anyone who isn't dead or from another plane of existence would do well to cover their ears right about now.
But it doesn't matter who I am, but who you are. You are gods in the becoming. You are the Gnostics. You are the veterans of 1,000 psychic wars, and you set your controls to the heart of the sun. You are exiled from your true home, the choir of the unknown God, and cast as slaves in a metaphorical Egypt, or world of forms. No state of divinity to be in this diaspora of false dreams and anxious nightmares. That's why you're here, my beloved true seekers. You are eroding away the chains of your artificial identities, tired of carrying blocks of material desire, and ready to leave the endless deserts of societal lies that have gagged you since you were a child.
What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
You are light, you are holy. Part of you is older than time and space. Like the Gospel of Thomas number 50 tells us, Jesus said, if they say to you, where have you come from? Say to them, we have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself, established itself, and appeared in their image. And it's time to remember this, not learn it. And the esoteric is perhaps the rubric to recall your deific legacy before your rotting body gives way to the worms, and you are jailed into another shell that probably won't remember all that it learned in the prior life.
The goal in life is not to eliminate misery, it's to keep misery to the minimum.
And one of the oldest and perhaps best esoteric paths is that of the Freemasons. There's no point in torturing ourselves with all the hoopla, disinformation, and bogus folklore that has recently surrounded the Freemason. Dan Brown, Holy Blood and Holy Grail, Templar Revelations, and other peddlers of bombast have made the Freemasons the new Illuminati or Elders of Zion of the 21st century. More and more books and movies like National Treasure or From Hell are coming out. The hype has gotten so bad even some Freemasons must be forgetting what the role of this ancient order really is about.
Someone helped put a mirror up in front of my face, and I didn't like what I saw one bit. And you know what I did? I changed.
But as always, here at the Virtual Alexandria, we offer you a pizza slice of the truth. Sure, we have some guests like Richard Smoley, Phil Gardner, Cherry S., and others that claim some wild assertions about the Freemasons. None of them with paltry evidence, I must add. They know what they're talking about. But we decided to actually invite a high-ranking Freemason who also happens to be a bestseller writer. We blaspheme, you decide. And our guest is Robert Lomas, best-selling author of Hiram's Key, Turning Solomon's Key, and Turning the Templar Key.
The issue isn't whether you're paranoid, Lenny. The issue is whether you're paranoid enough.
For more information on this Masonic leader, please visit his website, robertlomas, LOMAS.com. It certainly preggers with goodies that aren't found in the interview or even the books. I like that name. Reminds me of that Family Guy episode. Robert Loggia. Robert Lomas.
I am so alone.
Anywho, you'll be very refreshed with the interview, I promise you. No sensationalism but the tofu and soy of Freemasonry, from the rituals to their mystical views. And please get Hiram's Key. Robert gives you all the Masonic sacraments, clandestine details, and basically the blueprint of Freemasonry. It's like reading a government top-secret document. Furthermore, Robert is a scientist, so he makes sure to cross-reference the supernatural with the scientific view, through studies, systematic data, and logic. Hiram's Key is a very well-balanced and a cornucopia of treasure for those of you curious about the Freemasons without the fairy tales.
Why are you messing with the fantasy? We know about the reality. Don't ruin the fantasy, okay?
Many of you already know of history changers who were Freemasons, like Thomas Jefferson, Voltaire, Benjamin Franklin, and John Wayne. But those are only a few, my beloved truth seekers, who sought the craft to make their inner and outer world a nicer patio. As always, you can look it up on your favorite search engine. But let me give you a small list while you're sitting before your computer, burning fire from rolled paper, and drinking coffee or something with bull piss. You'll probably be more than shocked as many emperors, dictators, and kings of various countries were Freemasons. There are even rumors that some popes were Freemasons, believe it or not. Anything is possible in the realms of the esoterica, especially for curious souls that want to avoid the psychic Iron Maiden of orthodoxy in their lives.
Well, have you considered the possibility that you're simply not meant to be happy, no matter where you are?
No, I haven't. Not until you mentioned it.
There's jazz musician Louis Armstrong, astronaut Buzz Aldrin, Benedict Arnold, forget that one, please. There is Ataturk, the stalwart who founded modern and secular Turkey from the ashes of the Ottoman Turk Empire. There is Bach, Simon Bolivar, Winston Churchill, Nat King Cole, Bob Dole. There is Gerald Ford, many English kings and other American presidents, Burl Ives, Jesse Jackson, Rudyard Kipling, Harpo Marx, Mozart, Will and Roy Rogers. Both Roosevelts were Freemasons. There is also Joseph Smith, founder of the Mormon religion. There is Mark Twain, Oscar Wilde, and Arnold Palmer.
I'm waiting to be impressed.
And that's just scratching the rash, my beloved truth seekers. There are lists with mighty Freemasons in the hundreds. What company to keep? And there has to be something about them thar Freemasons if they bred such figures of that magnitude. This doesn't mean run to the nearest lodge in order to become rich, famous, or sure you can dismiss your latest parking ticket. then you'll be missing the meaning of Freemasonry and all the secret societies of history, and even Gnosticism itself. It's never about the outer voyage first. It starts with the involution that kindles the light of enlightenment, samadhi, satori, or gnosis inside of your innermost sanctums. Then the world is not only your oyster, but you own the pearl as well.
I can do anything I want. So can you.
And like I've said in past shows, you don't have to limit yourself to just one secret organization. Join a few until you find what broadens your path to the treasury of light. Other so-called secret organizations like the Rosicrucians, Martinists, or Egyptian Masons have their own great lists and have changed mankind's history for the better. It doesn't take a village, like Clinton said, but a strong interior temple where your inner child can play and mold a fabric of imagination and wonder. Simple as that, my beloved truth seekers. And Robert Lomas will gift you with the reasons and rewards of Freemasonry, besides silly hidden treasures or documents that can bring down governments. Why bring down governments? Just destroy their federal taxing mechanisms. Absent tax departments are enough to make Jehovah roar in anger because Mammon is one of his servants. Whoa, almost got political. We are about politically incorrectness at CCG. There is enough heresy and blasphemy as it is on this program. Except for one Texas guy, and I don't mean the president, all politicians are pawns of the demiurge, Samael, Saklas, Jehovah, Satan, Carrot Top, or whatever you want to call them.
There's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad.
What shall it profit a man to gain the world? And you know the rest. But enough of my drivel. Let's hear from Robert Lomas from the horse's mouth on what exactly is Freemasonry, even if the wise and foolish virgins giggle with their bodies glowing bright. Good evening, this is the Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis interview. Today we have Dr. Lomas discussing his book, Turning the Hiram Key. How are you doing today, Dr. Lomas?
I'm very well, Miguel, and do call me Robert.
I shall call you Robert. Well, anyway, thank you very much for joining the show and discussing your book. Why don't we start with how your story began, which was with this odd phrase, the sound of lightning. What is the sound of lightning, Robert?
It's the most scary thing that can ever happen to you. If to actually hear a lightning strike as it's ripping through the air is incredibly frightening. But it's actually worse than that, because before that happens to you, you're generally in a very intense electric field. Now, fortunately, I was inside a Jeep Cherokee at the time, which is a very effective Faraday cage to make sure that it doesn't actually kill you. But what happened was I was driving on a fairly remote hilltop in the north of England, and there was a gathering storm. And I got this very brooding presence in the back, which I felt there was something in the back seat of the Jeep. And it got worse and worse. My hair started standing on end, the hair on the back of my hands, the hair on the back of my neck. And I ended up pulling into the side of the road to have a look if there was anything on the back seat, because the feeling that something was staring into the back of my neck was intense. And as I'd looked, there was nothing there. And I turned back, and at that moment, there was a lightning strike, and I heard the lightning strike. What I actually heard was the collapse of the electric field that had been building up as the lightning struck upwards from earth to sky. That field collapsed, and it caused an enormous spike, which actually triggered my audio nerves directly. And I saw, as I saw the lightning, I also heard this sizzling, ripping sound. And then about 3 seconds later, I heard the sound of the thunder, which was the noise of the spark in the air. And it was a very, very scary experience.
And you would say this experience made it easier for you to join the Freemasons, an act of God, perhaps?
No, I was already a Freemason when it happened to me, but I hadn't actually realized the significance of a key part of Masonic teaching, which is basically that you should seek knowledge of the center, and this is described as a sort of meditative, ecstatic state. Well, at the moment I heard the light, I experienced this ecstatic state for the first time, and it was wonderful. All the scariness had disappeared, all the fright disappeared, and as I was exposed to this rapidly changing electric field, what seemed to happen was that the whole world expanded, and I felt at one with the whole world, with the whole universe. It was as if my consciousness had expanded to encompass every particle in the known universe, and it was a sort of wonderful, wonderful experience. And I suddenly realized what a lot of these Masonic philosophers had been on about, that there is a state of ecstasy. It's a state which is achieved through meditation, and when it happens to you, it makes you realize that you are a part of everything. And so from then on, I got more interested in the philosophy of Freemasonry and the training techniques that certain esoteric lodges use to help you get to this state, and I started to practice them because, having experienced this moment of ecstasy, I wanted to do it again. I could do without the scary bits of hearing the light and the eyes in the back of my head, which were the build-up to it. But the moment of release was absolutely wonderful.
Wow. I think on the show we might actually call it a moment of Gnosis.
You could do it. It was a moment of insight, but it was a moment when you suddenly realized that you were a part of everything. It was if your mind expanded and you could see the whole of the Milky Way in front of you. It was wonderful. And I say, having realized what it is, and that it's a state of mind which you can achieve by practice, it's something I've sought out since. It's quite difficult to achieve. It's a little bit like balancing a marble on the tip of a ballpoint pen, but you can't hold it for very long. But there are certain ways that do it. There are focused meditations which you learn within certain esoteric lodges and in Freemasonry, and once you've learnt them, then it becomes easier. You can't guarantee it's going to happen, but when it does, you come out feeling really, really good.
And backing up a bit, Robert, you being a man of science and seemingly a Gnostic, as you write, why did you decide to join the Freemasons in the first place?
Well, I'm an agnostic in that I don't really think there's a personal God out there. But I do think that there is what I would describe as a form of supreme being. And this is something which is not necessarily benign, not necessarily hostile, but totally trustworthy. And that's the laws of physics. And the laws of physics are something I can totally rely on. Like, I don't have to pray to the law of gravity so that I don't fall off the planet accidentally when it's whizzing round in space. But it's neither benign nor hostile to me. It will hold me firmly in a rocking boat in a rough sea. But likewise, if I happen to trip on the edge of a cliff, it will smash me to pieces. But I can always rely on it being there. And there are certain basic laws of physics which are extremely fundamental. Without them, we wouldn't exist, we wouldn't have evolved, we wouldn't have developed intelligence, we wouldn't have developed consciousness, and they're actually very, very finely tuned. There are about 6 basic numbers, and if any one of these basic numbers had been slightly different, we wouldn't actually be here to be talking about it. And it's quite an awesome thought, really, that there are fundamental laws which have come from somewhere, and we don't really know where they came from. They came out of this great singularity that we call the Big Bang. And at that point, language breaks down, logic breaks down, and mathematics break down, because there are certain things about mathematics that we can't prove. We can't prove 1 = 1. We take it as an act of faith. We can't prove that all logical sequences can be solved. The basis of Gödel's theorem says that we can't. We know there are unsolvable logical problems, and we've got problems with language, because if we say what happened before time began, it's rather like making a statement, this statement is a lie. If it's a lie, it's true, and if it's true, it's a lie. And there's a paradox there. Since time began at the moment when the Big Bang erupted, you cannot ask what happened before the Big Bang because there was no time to ask about. So we end up with concepts which are extremely difficult to explain. And one of the wonders of Freemasonry is that it uses ritual and it uses symbolism to think about these things which you cannot put into language, you cannot put into mathematics, and you cannot really put into logic. But you know they're there. And with symbols, these symbols that you learn about in Freemasonry actually help you to contemplate these matters, which are very, very difficult things to put into words.
It seems to me, once Aristotle wrote about the mystery religions, is that you don't learn anything in the mystery religions, you undergo the mystery religions. Is that what the Freemasons are relying on, the old mystery religion schools?
I think the techniques they use have been taken from the original mystery schools, and effectively we carry out 3 degrees, and each of these 3 degrees addresses certain key points in your development. The first degree is about overcoming your fear. The second degree is about developing your mind and your intellect, and the third degree is about facing up to your own mortality. And you don't learn them, you can't steal them, you have to live them. And the only way you can actually live these rituals is to have them carried out by people who've done them before. And they can guide you, they can direct you, they can help you focus, but they can't teach you, because you've got to live them for yourself before you can understand them. So it probably is very similar to the original concepts of the mystery religion. You grow by living through it, by being exposed to it, not by reading about it in a book, not by guessing about it, not by being told about it, but by actually experiencing it in the very center of your mind.
And Robert, what do you mean grow with each degree?
Each degree prepares you for something further. So if you haven't managed to master your fear, and you haven't managed to master your emotions, and you're easily overcome by rage and you're easily diverted, there's little point in trying to develop your intellect. So each one of these steps leads you further. So once you can control your intellect, you can control your anger, you can control your emotion, you can move on to develop your logical reasoning powers, your intellect, your mind, which is the focus of the second degree. And when you've got both these sections under control, where you can think clearly and where you can master your emotions and master your fear, then you're ready to face up to the question of your own mortality, which is the key teaching of the Masonic system. It's probably the oldest spiritual self-help system still in existence. It's been around since at least 1480 in Aberdeen, and it took elements of religious teaching and put them in a secular environment where it used the metaphor of building a temple of humanity to actually separate out the religious teaching techniques from the religious dogma, because Freemasonry doesn't insist you have any particular beliefs. It just says, do you think there is an order in the universe to study? Do you think there is a supreme order there that's worth looking at? And as a physicist, I've got to believe that, or there's no point in me trying to understand it.
Yeah, and what I like is that you utilize and reveal a lot of science and studies that show the benefits of the religious and spiritual life. So basically, is it safe to say that the human mind is hardwired for the mystical experience already?
I think it is. It's something which we seem to have used to good effect from our very earliest beginnings, perhaps about 200,000 years ago, when we evolved as a sort of modern Homo sapiens. And strangely enough, some of the earliest symbols ever written down by any modern humans were written down in South Africa, at a place called Bloembos Cave, about 70,000 years ago. And the symbols they drew are symbols that are still used in a modern Masonic lodge. So these symbols have some sort of hardwired sacred effect on us. We look at them, we like them, and it's one of the things I've tested with my own students, because I actually teach, one of the undergraduate courses I teach is on basic market research. So we have to investigate something. And one of the things we've investigated is the response of individuals to various symbols. It's got useful spin-offs, for instance, if you think about it in terms of brand recognition. So what I do is I connect a couple of wires to the thumb and forefinger of my students, and I can then measure the degree to which they're sweating. It's called galvanic skin response. It's used in lie detectors. And I show them images of various symbols. And consistently, the sort of symbols which are used in Freemasonry, which are very old symbols and can be found, say, as early as 70,000 years ago and recur again and again throughout the Neolithic record, these symbols have a positive emotional impact on the students. And they don't know why. It's a subconscious effect. So it does seem to be that we're hardwired to look for certain spiritual awarenesses. And it seems to be something that when we contemplate it, when we get very stressed, we can feel this overflow of what I could only really describe as beneficent ecstasy. It's when your mind gets overwhelmed with peace, and you feel at peace with the whole of the cosmos. And that's the experience which is at the centre, I think, of a lot of religious beliefs. And having experienced it in a thunderstorm, I realised it was what Freemasonry was trying to teach about when it talked about the centre, a point from which no Mason can materially err, as the ritual puts it. So the people who set up the Masonic Rituals knew about this experience, knew how beneficial it was, and set about trying to encapsulate what's contained within the symbols we use and the rituals we use and the words we say and the postures we maintain to help people experience this state of mind. And it is a beneficial state of mind.
And Robert, as a Freemason, are you ready to face death at this stage?
As a Freemason, I've actually lived through my own funeral and come out on the other side. I know it's not the most horrific thing in the world. There are things far worse than death that you ought to worry about.
So, and this was done in a ritual?
This was done in a ritual.
Okay. Yeah, very much like the mystery schools and other secret societies. But a question I know is probably burning in a lot of the listeners' minds is this really ethical for you to reveal so many secrets in such detail in your book and right now?
I'm allowed to tell you about the rituals. I'm allowed to tell you what we do. I'm not allowed to tell you the exact words we use. I'm not allowed to teach you the grips, and I'm not allowed to give you the passwords. Otherwise, I'll have to kill you. But apart from that, I can tell you anything you like about what we do, because our teachings are not secret, our aims are not secret, our aims are brotherly love, relief, and truth. What we do is not secret, but our modes of recognition are secret, because that's how you gain entry to a lodge and you prove that you're ready to work at that particular spiritual level. It can be dangerous to go into these sort of situations if you're not properly prepared. It can be extremely scary. So we maintain certain modes of recognition which you give formally when you enter a lodge, and that's how they're used. And those are the only things which are the secrets of Freemasonry that we're not allowed to talk about.
And what was the most terrifying ritual you ever participated in?
It has to be the ritual where you participate as a corpse in your own funeral. That does seriously. You do seriously think about the meaning of life when you lie in the darkness of the grave, wrapped in a shroud, all on your own.
And what was probably the most bizarre ritual you ever experienced? I know there's one with you and a goat, but you don't go into details. What happened to the poor goat? I can't possibly talk about that because it's a standard Tyler's joke. But we say that up in the Pennine Hills of Yorkshire we actually use sheep. But I wouldn't want to go into that. It's one of the rituals of the cork degree, which is a very obscure side degree, which is practiced in the outer islands of Scotland, and it's called the cork degree because the ritual begins with taking the cork out of a bottle of Highland Park whiskey, and anybody who tells you that they've gone through this ritual and can remember it has not gone through it. You throw the cork over your shoulder as the first act of it. But these are not serious Masonic rituals. Needless to say, as you're saying right now, there are different types of Masonic schools. It's not monolithic.
There are three basic degrees called the craft, and they're called the Blue Lodges, and that is monolithic. It's worldwide. There are different Grand Lodges. There are different lodges, and every country has its own system of Grand Lodges, and over in America you've got a separate Grand Lodge for every state, and each of these are autonomous bodies, but they are in contact with each other. So it's probably the second largest spiritual organization in the world. There's only the Roman Catholic Church is bigger than Freemasonry.
Wow. And what are the other two?
We're the second one, and after that, it's probably the Protestant type churches and the various Islamic and Muslim and communities. But as a system of spiritual training, we're an old one, we're a worldwide one, and basically been a very successful one. And where you normally see Freemasonry, if you're not a Mason, is through the charitable work. But it's not a charitable organization. Its members carry out charity because it's a natural thing to do as part of the teaching, not because it was founded to be a charitable organization. Charity is a consequence of the teaching, not its raison d'etre.
And a lot of people, of course, would like to know what are the origins of Freemasons. Did they mysteriously come from the Knight Templars or before? When did the Freemasons begin?
The Freemasons began round about the time that a chapel was built in the north of Scotland called Roslin Chapel, which was made rather famous by Dan Brown. It was created as an act of political separatism by a gentleman called William Sinclair, and he brought in a very well-known political gentleman called William Hay. And William Hay carved into stone a number of great myths and stories, the story of death and resurrection, the story of searching for the hidden mysteries of nature and science, the story of the fearsome quest. All these are carved into the stone. And of course the Sinclairs used masons who were free men to carve these stone. Now, part of the plan that William Sinclair had was to partition the Kingdom of Scotland and to take control of it. And the Stuart kings at the time had a separate separate shrine called the Abbey of the Holy Rood. It's where the Scottish Parliament now is, at Holyrood. And for various reasons, the politics failed, and the chapel, then the Sinclair lands were broken up, and the Masons were dispersed. Now, it just so happens that the only place where there was work of sufficient size going on was the building of St. Nicholas's Kirk in Aberdeen. And the Masons who'd worked on this wonderful storybook in stone at Roslin most of them ended up working in Aberdeen, and that's where the first Masonic Lodge was formed. And we can find records of it in the borough records of the of Aberdeen Council, which go back to 1100, and we find that in 1483 there are records that one of the aldermen of the council was also made master of the lodge. So the lodge became a speculative society for spiritual advancement at about that time, and since then it's grown from that base in Scotland. It spread to England. It spread to England all the way around the world. It's had tremendous influence on a lot of societies. For instance, the American Constitution was written by Freemasons. George Washington was a Freemason. The Royal Society, which has been the driving force in the development of modern science, was created by Freemasons in London. It's effectively given the world democracy and modern science because of the teachings that are contained within it.
Yeah, wasn't Newton a Freemason as well?
Newton,
or a Rosicrucian?
He was a Rosicrucian. He wasn't, at that time there wasn't a formal lodge structure, so there's no record of him ever belonging to a lodge. But he did associate with people who have admitted to being Freemasons. But it was before the formation of lodge records, which only really started in 1717. He was certainly very interested in Solomon's Temple and wrote a considerable amount of that, as well as developing calculus and the theory of gravity.
And it's no secret that the Freemasons and the religious powers have had friction throughout history, especially the Catholic Church. Does this have to do with the meaning of God, or were some Freemasons, like Voltaire, just consciously, volatile towards the Church?
I think it's probably due to the fact that Freemason leaves you to your own devices about how you approach God. It basically gives you the freedom in the second degree to study the hidden mysteries of science and nature that you might better know your Maker, which means you don't need a priest intervening with your idea of God, and you don't have to accept any dogma. You can ask your own questions. And that's, of course, what led to the development of modern science. Well, one of the things about religious thinking, and particularly churches, is that you must accept a total dogma to be a believer. Freemasonry imposes no dogma on you whatsoever. It says your belief are a private matter between you and what you believe rules the universe, and it's up to you to make your own peace. It's not for Freemasonry to mediate or tell you what to do or what not to do. And that, of course, conflicts with a lot of the teachings of the Church.
But you have to believe in a higher power, or there's no such thing as an atheistic Freemason.
There's no such thing as an atheistic Freemason. Every Freemason has to believe that there is an order which governs the universe, and if you don't believe that, you won't be allowed to join Freemasonry. But Freemasonry doesn't ask you what it is. So effectively, it's in my lodge, for instance, we have Jews, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have a Hindu, and all of us can talk about, we're using neutral terms to talk about the spiritual matters which concern us all without having to subscribe to the other's religious dogma. We use neutral terms like the great architect of the universe or the grand geometrician of the universe. And these are terms which a physicist will relate to as well. So my view of Supreme Being may be very different from somebody who's a follower of Christ. It will be different from a Hindu. It will be different from a Muslim. But we will have certain common elements, and it's those common elements that Freemasonry brings together. It seeks to look for the commonality with different belief systems, not try to exploit the differences.
And going back a little bit further, when you talked about symbols, why is myth so important to Freemasonry?
Because myth is a way of telling you a truth. If you think about it, from the youngest age, we've all been conditioned to listen to stories. we learn stories at our mother's knee, we learn about the world by being told stories, and we learn about the great truths of the human condition by listening to great stories. And there are only a limited number of stories that can be told, and most of those stories are incorporated into Masonic myths. And these stories speak to us at a very, very deep level, and they convey truths about the human condition which are not particular to any particular religious belief system. So, for instance, the story of death and resurrection is a driving force in the New Testament, but it's also a driving force in the main Masonic myth. It's a driving force in fairy stories. It's the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So this story all these basic stories we've learned as children can still speak to us as adults. And myth is not a fantasy. It's not a made-up fiction. It's actually taking an archetype and using that archetype to tell us something about the human condition and how we can relate to it. And that's how Freemasonry uses myth as part of its teaching. The myths are acted out as rituals, but the stories are very powerful stories that have a great emotional impact on the people who carry them out.
And Robert, could you tell us about the myth of Hiram and the Temple of Solomon?
Yes, the myth of Hiram says that there were three great rulers of the craft who had to come together to create the Temple of Solomon. One was Hiram, king of Tyre, who was basically the civil engineer. The other one was Solomon, king of Israel, and the third one was a gentleman called Hiram Abif, who was the architect. And these are symbolized in the lodge as three columns, known as wisdom, strength, and beauty. King Solomon represents wisdom, King Hiram of Tyre represents strength, and Hiram Abif represents wisdom. But before the temple could be completed, the architect was murdered by ruffians who struck him down. And the temple then had to be completed by people who learnt the secret, who rediscovered the secrets that were lost with the death of the architect. And in the third degree, you play the role of this architect, the great. And the architect we're talking about is not the Temple of Solomon, which is a metaphor. It's the temple of perfected humanity. Each individual Freemason is a living stone in the temple, which is basically society, the way in which people work together for the betterment of everybody. That's why you'll find Freemasons supporting various charities. You'll find them supporting schools. You'll find them making charitable givings, not just to Freemasons, because the role of a Freemason is to become a better member of society.
Yeah, it's true, because here in Chicago, I used to attend a Gnostic Mass, and the one place we could do it without any trouble was at a Masonic lodge. Does this happen often? Masons working with other esoteric secret organizations?
We are quite open to other people's religious beliefs. We do not try and impose any religious belief. And in fact, one of the things which is most important about Freemasonry is that during our meetings we forbid the discussion of religion and politics. Now, these are the things people most often quarrel about. So we don't inquire what your religious belief is. It's a private matter between you and your maker, not something that is anybody else's concern. And it's that tolerance which really makes Freemasonry very different in the way it relates to all people's religious beliefs.
And you're out on the street or at the airport, and how would you recognize another Mason? By his ring?
You might recognize them by wearing symbols, but generally, if you got talking to somebody and they wanted to check if you were a Mason, then Masonic ritual is the same all over the world. So you could say a few words of ritual and you'd get a response, and you'd know that man or that woman was a Mason, because there are thriving ladies' lodges as well.
Yeah, that's one of the myths I've heard, that the women are not allowed as Freemasons.
It's totally untrue. My late mother-in-law was a very senior lady Freemason, and I was introduced to Freemasonry by being taken to a gentleman's night at the Lodge of the Eastgate in Chester, which was a ladies' lodge. So there's a thriving ladies Freemasonry, and I've got an awful lot of goodwill to the sisterin. We don't have shared lodge meetings, but we do often share buildings, and the male lodges, which tend to own the buildings because they've been around longer, the ladies' lodges have only been around for about 150 years, don't have any problem usually allowing the ladies to use the lodges. And their ritual is often better than ours. I've often spoken in ladies' lodges. They will open and close the lodge formally and then invite me in afterwards to talk to them and give lectures.
So needless to say, Robert, one of the other fables of the Freemasons is it's just a good old boys network for business and drinking. Is any truth to that?
We do dine together, and sometimes lodges drink together. Not all lodges do. Some lodges forbid alcohol, but it's not basically a dining or a drinking club. And it expressly forbids the use of Freemasonry for business or political purposes. If you're caught doing it, you'll be expelled. So it's not a networking club. It's a system of spiritual self-improvement where men of goodwill or women of goodwill can work together for their own spiritual advancement.
Well, that dispels a lot of myths. I remember watching a Simpsons episode where they make fun of it. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've seen it, and it was funny.
Stonecutters.
Yeah, it was funny, but it wasn't accurate.
Yeah.
We do dress strangely, and we do wear very odd things. But I mean, it's all right for consenting adults in private to wear leather pinnies and cuffs and gloves and strange collars. There's no law against it. And if you're a Masonic Knights Templar, you get to wear big boots, a sword, and a cape, and a really funny hat.
Wow, that's an extra bonus right there.
Yes, Freemasonry gives you a chance to raid the dressing up box, and there's nothing wrong with that. You want to see some of the things I wear when I go to a university graduation.
And by the way, have you ever watched the movie From Hell with Johnny Depp?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, okay. If you ever get a chance, it's about it is about Jack the Ripper, but it actually connects Jack the Ripper with the Freemasons. That's been another long-standing myth.
Oh, really? It's because of the penalties of the degrees. For instance, if I unwittingly told you how to do the grip of the first degree, then I'd have to have my tongue torn out my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by the roots, and my body buried in the rough sands of the sea, whence the tide does pass twice in the course of a natural day. But we're not allowed by health and safety to carry it out without sterilizing the knife first. These oaths go back to medieval times, and they're actually the penalties that were inflicted on people who were found guilty of treason. So in the third degree, your body is cut into parts and they're spread to the four corners of the world. So if you think about it, it's rather like the techniques of hanging, drawing, and quartering that were once used as a form of punishment. But they're symbolic. I don't think we've carried them out for years now. I've never actually buried anybody in the rough sands of the sea.
Well, you wouldn't tell me, Robert, if you had.
Of course, I couldn't possibly. It's a secret, of course. No, we do have penalties within our ritual, but they're not penalties which are inflicted on other people, and they're not actually inflicted on Freemasons either. But in the days when these rituals were first put together, and we're talking about 400 or 500 years ago, this was the sort of penalty which the civil authorities would extract from you. You know, we have got a little bit more civilized in the few hundred years, but we haven't changed our form of ritual. And it does put you up short and think, well, can I really tell him that? But the only thing we protect are the modes of recognition.
And lastly, Robert, which is, of course, something listeners really want to know, and it also goes back to the fable, because a lot of people have always thought or told me, you know, the only way to be a Freemason is if your father was a Freemason, or you can draw your ancestry to somebody in your family to a Freemason. I want to be a Freemason. What do I do, Robert?
You simply go to your nearest lodge and you ask, because nobody will ask you to become a Freemason. You have got to ask. Because if you haven't got enough motivation to ask, then you don't really want to be a Freemason.
And what was your motivation? You say it was your grandmother?
It was my mother-in-law.
Oh, yes, sorry.
She was a senior lady Freemason, and when I was courting my wife some 30 or 40 years ago, I got invited to a social evening at her mother's lodge, and I found it interesting and fascinating. And then, 20 years later, after we'd been married quite a while, I realised there was a lodge in my local village, and one of my friends joined, and I said, "What's this all about?" And he said, "Well, if you want to find out, you'll have to ask." So I said, "Tell me about it." And from then on, I was invited to join, and I found it a fascinating study ever since. And that was basically why I wrote the original book, The Hiram Key, because nobody would really explain it to me. So I set out to try and find out for myself. And basically, turning the Hiram Key is a guide for people who want to find out more about Freemasonry, and for Masons who want to learn more about what it's about. But you'll notice it doesn't give away any of the secrets. It cuts away carefully when all the various signs and identification signals are given, on the grounds that I don't want to have my tongue torn from the roots, my throat cut across, and my body buried in the rough sands of the sea.
Well, I think that's all the time we have today, Robert. I'd like to thank you for coming on the show, taking your time, and giving us all your secrets.
Well, these were only the secrets that I'm allowed to give, so I haven't actually hazarded my tongue too much. But if it encourages people to find out a little bit more about the Masonic Lodge, do go along, knock on the door, and ask them about it, and they'll be pleased to show you. They'll show you around the temple. They'll invite you to social evenings, and if you're interested in joining, they will encourage you to join. But you have to ask.
Okay, well, again, thank you, and I'm going to start looking at the news every day to make sure your body doesn't appear somewhere. From now on, I want to see this. But thanks a lot for coming on, and you have yourself a good day, Robert.
Okay, and thank you for having me on, Miguel.
It was my pleasure. And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. Robert Lomas discussing his latest book, Hiram's Key. He spares no secrets and denies no esoteric knowledge about the Freemasons. Let's hope it doesn't cost him his life, but I have a feeling I'm being a drama queen for the sake of being a drama queen.
There are, of course, those who do not want us to speak.
I hope you're at least more in tune with the Masonic animus, even if you still believe they are an extension of the Gnostics, the Therapeutae, the Sufis, Knights Templars, or whatever. All history's fiction anyway. All that matters is to escape the embrace of history, including your history, until it melts away against the winds of spiritual and mental unshackling. Then nothing matters. All that is left is a you that existed before you.
Everybody is stuck with the things that they're not proud of.
And please visit robertlomas.com for more information on him, his works, and other interesting sundries he has concerning the Brotherhood. It's quite a fun place, if you dare to ask me.
Are you like a crazy person?
I'm quite sure they will say so.
Well, we're reaching a milestone of sorts here at Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis. On May 12, it will be 2 years since the first show, which was a 2-hour marathon graced by Robert Price in the now defunct freethoughtmedia.com. By Lilith, I was terrible back then, a lot worse than now.
I may sound like a lunatic, but I'm not crazy.
We're also closing in on 100 shows. Can you believe that, my beloved True Seekers? I never knew there was so much about Gnosticism, ancient Christianity, and their brethren in the esoterica. It all started with me just deciding I'd do like 4 shows since the slots were free at Free Thought Media as some sort of promotion. Kinda like a quick crash course on Gnosticism that could be used as a reference for the kingdoms of atheists and skeptics.
It was a disaster.
But suddenly more guests popped up and more topics popped up out of the woodwork, and here I began our adventure. And perhaps, as some of you have heard, it's time to hang up the gloves. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. I have done my best to spread light, or at least illume some paths for you, my beloved True Seekers, who I love very much. But nothing lasts forever, although I, Miguel Connor, will incarnate as something else in order to continue the Gnostic revival. I'll never abandon you, Hypatia. Bottom line, I need to do some soul searching or have the Aeons give me a signal.
So the fate of the entire human race depends upon my wild guess.
There are several reasons. Exhaustion is one of them. I'm a one-man show. I'm the producer, web designer, talent seeker, secretary, bookkeeper, engineer, and host, among other jobs. I've asked for help, especially with web design, but the Gnostic community has been silent towards me. But I keep fighting the good fight. My ego, my own little demiurge, feels taken for granted. Every month the listeners grow, but the money lessens. I never expected to make a profit, but I can't hemorrhage any more money. I gave up a career, a social life, and was ostracized by some family members for the sake of CCG.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Yes, those were my choices, but I have always trusted that we were a community, a Gnostic and occult community. I get great fan and hate mail, but a little monetary support to invest back in the show wouldn't hurt. I have the same equipment as when I started, which means I'm living in the Jurassic era. I've battled hard for Mayman not to control me, but part of my mortal incarnation is still connected to the domain of the god of this world. Cut me and I bleed. Tell me a Dane Cook joke and I cry.
Today's a good day to die.
My spiritual self has no problems. It knows that everything will be alright. I am no guru or master or prophet or spiritual maestro. I'm just some burned out ex-alcoholic writer that experienced gnosis here and there. If you seek, you will find. Beyond CCG, there is a vast world of mysteries that can take you places this show wishes it could. And I know that I will continue on my own path as well. Like I said, I'm leaning on ending our adventure, but I will ponder upon this. This is no gimmick because I could have pulled the plug all these years I never had support or any money. It's just that we're reaching a milestone like I mentioned. 2 years and 100 shows. Unfortunately, the reality is that there is much more to learn. Perhaps Abraxas, the energy and active force of the divine imagination, can send me a shard of vigor and dispel the petty desires of my always infected ego.
Freaking idiot!
I'm not perfect. I have my insecurities and wonder often if I'll ever get out of the Matrix or the Black Iron prison. My advantage is that I'm not very mentally stable and have that Taurus streak that never says quit. So here we are. Let me know what you think. Hate me well or dismiss me without a thought. Let's enjoy our time together and know that you will always be my beloved true seekers. Is this a victory for Jehovah? Nah, he lost the war a long time ago. When we return to the beginning of the end, we'll see his mother, Sophia or Chokmah in Hebrew, take his power away and bring a new age to our world. And we'll party like it's 2012. I am, and I am Abraxas. The road is ended, the song is over. Thought I'd have something more to say. But don't cultivate any troubles, my beloved true seekers, because like heaven above you, the spy that loved you, I'm keeping all of your secrets safe with me tonight. Hello and goodbye as always.
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission.
We need cameras.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you, and in your panic you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutler. He promised you order, he promised you peace, and all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent.
Choose life. Choose a job. Choose a career. Choose a family. Choose a fucking big television. Choose washing machines, cars, compact disc players and electrical tin openers. Choose good health, low cholesterol and dental insurance. Choose fixed interest mortgage repayments. Choose a starter home. Choose your friends. Choose leisure wear and matching luggage. Choose a 3-piece suite on hire purchase and a range of fucking fabrics. Choose DIY and wondering who the fuck you are on a Sunday morning. Choose sitting on that couch watching mind-numbing, spirit-crushing game shows, stuffing fucking junk food into your mouth. Choose rotting away at the end of it all, pissing your last in a miserable home, nothing more than an embarrassment to the selfish, fucked up brats that you've spawned to replace yourselves. Choose your future. Choose life. But why would I want to do a thing like that? I chose not to choose life. I chose something else. And the reasons? There are no reasons. Who needs reasons when you've got heroin?